Well, hey there, Breakfast Club. I'm Peach, and it's Sunday. This week, we're talking about incest, the topic to end all uncomfortable discussions. First off, I'd like to reiterate the general consensus of the Breakfast Club by saying, ew, but I fully acknowledge that an ick factor is not a valid argument when discussing the ethics of something. Personally, I'm hesitant to shrug my shoulders when discussing incestuous relationships between people who are very close in blood. That would be between siblings and, of course, parents and children. The reason for this is because in such situations, there is very often an element of abuse alongside it, especially when it's between parents and children. With siblings, there can be one sibling pressuring or intimidating another, although it's absolutely possible for such relationships to be wholly consensual, particularly between siblings who are very close in age. As others in the Breakfast Club have already pointed out, humans have generally evolved to be repulsed by sex with a close relative because of the propensity of birthing offspring with genetic disorders and the lack of genetic diversity. To be fair, one incestuous generation has a good chance of not expressing these disorders. The problem comes when there's too much inbreeding, as evident in some past royal families in which there was generation after generation of sickly, weak children who were eventually rendered all but completely infertile. That happened quite a bit with many ancient Egyptian dynasties, all the way up to Cleopatra's family, the Ptolemies. More recently, the Habsburg dynasty, which ruled throughout Europe for about 200 years, eventually went extinct in the 1700s because of their preference for marriages between first cousins and even uncles and nieces. However, there is also a phenomenon known as genetic sexual attraction, which is exactly what it sounds like, being sexually attracted to people who are closely related. This has occurred mainly between family members who didn't grow up together. Siblings who were separated during childhood, and adults who didn't grow up with their biological parents. The common explanation for this is that people generally tend to be more attracted to others who share similar physical traits, but I'm rather skeptical of that. After all, if that were actually the case, then half-breeds like me wouldn't exist in such high numbers. The natural repulsion of being sexually attracted to consanguineous relatives is called the Westermarck effect. It hypothesizes that people who live close to each other during childhood bypass any sexual attraction later on. So, consanguineous relatives who don't grow up together risk developing sexual feelings for each other when they meet later in life because they may have a lot in common compared to unrelated people. It's not just looking similar. For example, I was separated from most of my family growing up, including my siblings and aunts and uncles and cousins. And when I started getting to know a few of them after I grew up, I was really shocked to learn how similar some of them are to me in character and interests and intellect. It's actually eerie. Now, we all subconsciously look for these similar interests when we evaluate potential mates, in which case it actually makes sense that genetic sexual attraction would occur. Incest between close relatives is pretty much illegal in all 50 states, but there is one form of incestuous marriage that is still legal: cousin marriage. And no, it's not just in the South. 26 states allow first cousins to marry with or without conditions, and 46 states allow marriages between first cousins once removed. I'm not entirely sure why these unions are still legal while other incestuous unions are not, considering that first cousins can have too much genetic overlap between them. After all, first cousins have the same grandparents, and first cousins once removed have great-grandparents in common. On a genetic level, that's not a wide difference. Maybe it's legal because a lot of cultures have traditionally allowed cousin marriages. I've been doing my genealogy for years, and I've found quite a bit of overlap on my father's side, which isn't surprising since his family have largely remained in the same small Virginia county for centuries. I found out that not only did my grandmother marry her first cousin, a union from which I did not descend, but so did one pair of my great-grandparents. from which I do descend. Again, this isn't exactly a rare thing, particularly in communities that have existed for several generations. Now, do I find these unions to be unethical? If they're totally consensual, then no. Do I find them revolting? Yeah, I do. So, that's all from me today. Be sure to subscribe to the Breakfast Club channel if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you all here next Sunday. Paul, you are up next, and we will see you tomorrow.